Game 2 of the 2024 NFL season between the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles just wrapped up in Brazil, and the Eagles did take home the victory 34-29. But I think the main takeaway and what really everybody is talking right now is not necessarily about the game itself, it's about the health of Packers quarterback Jordan Love. Now, he signed a massive contract extension this offseason to remain in Green Bay for the next several years, and after the season that he had last year, over 30 touchdowns, second in the league to only Dak Prescott in terms of passing touchdowns, over 4,000 passing yards, leading him to a huge victory against the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs. It was a pretty well-deserved contract extension. Although Love had only really produced for one season because he's been sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for his entirety of his career so far, the Packers felt confident in giving him a long-term extension, and I think they were also projecting him to just continue to get even better as he gains more experience. So heading into this season, this was a pretty big year for Jordan Love to continue to show what he showed at the end of last season, or the last half of the season, where he really turned into one of the best quarterbacks in the entire sport. And the Packers as a team had a ton of expectations heading into the season because of all the young talent that they have across the roster. They also added in Josh Jacobs in free agency, Xavier McKinney, one of the best safeties in the league, to help out the back end of their defense. I mean, they made a ton of additions. I made a video, I think a couple months ago, really going over all the moves that the Packers made. They also got a new defensive coordinator, finally moved off of Joe Barry and brought in Jeff Hafley, who was the head coach of Boston College. He didn't really have a ton of experience in terms of actually just being like an NFL coach. Most of his experience is from the college level. I think he only really called plays for like one season as well. So he was kind of a little bit of a risky hire, but he seems like a very impressive guy, really connected well with a lot of players, it seems like. And he also does have a connection to the Shanahan tree. So I do like the upside there. I think he could be a pretty good hire. But all that to say, the Green Bay Packers were seen as a Super Bowl contender this year, a very serious threat to come out of the NFC. And all of that might have just changed in the snap of the fingers, really like the third to last play of the game tonight against the Eagles in Brazil. It was late in the fourth quarter, I think with like 27 seconds left. The Eagles went up by 5 points. Jordan Love and the Packers offense was getting the ball back, trying to have a miraculous, I guess, Hail Mary type of play to win the game. Jordan Love on the first play did a beautiful little spin out of the pocket, all moved to his left and threw an absolute dime down the left sideline to Dontavian Wicks. I mean, it was one of the classic, hey, Jordan Love, is he the next Aaron Rodgers? Because it was just a beautiful throw on the move down the sideline. But the very next play is where this injury occurred, and Love once again was trying to extend the play, and it seems like Jalen Carter kind of got in with some pressure, and Love just kind of flipped the ball out to Josh Jacobs behind him to avoid the sack and the game being over. But in the process of all that happening, it does look like Jalen Carter kind of rolled up on his ankle and kind of his lower, I guess, calf, and I feel like his knee bent a little bit. And if you do look in slow motion, kind of up close, it does look like something in his knee like pops. And so that is really the concern right now with Love, is that he did have a sort of ligament tear, maybe the ACL or an MCL, which is, I guess, the better hope, because if it's just an MCL, he could theoretically come back in maybe a couple months and be back for maybe the end of the season. There hasn't been an official report yet. I'm just really speculating at this point, going off of what some of like the Twitter doctors have been saying. I don't think we're going to get an official report until the Packers are back in Green Bay at their facility where they can do an MRI, all those, in-depth details, look into his knee and see what the real problem is. But the fact that we have that video of like his knee popping, the fact that he really couldn't walk or put any weight on his leg, he had to have a lot of help to get off the field. And then they also showed him a couple of times really rubbing and pointing to his knee. The trainers were kind of over there talking to him. All the signs are not pointing super good right now. I think the best case scenario is that maybe it's just a bone bruise, or maybe it's just the MCL and maybe a slight tear there, and he's only going to miss a couple of weeks. I think that is the best case right now for Love and the Packers moving forward. And you really just hate this for Love, the Packers, and all of their fans, because this is literally week one, like the first week of the season. And if Love does have to miss the entirety of the year, really all that hope and excitement is gone just like that. I've seen some people mention maybe the Packers will go out and get Ryan Tannehill. Maybe he can be a veteran, be serviceable, get the Packers close to the playoffs, but that's not really the same thing as having Jordan Love, who's looking like one of the best up-and-coming quarterbacks in the entire league. And we saw in this game how lethal the Packers offense can be with Josh Jacobs coming over. He had a couple of really big runs, and then just the multitude of wide receivers. I think the Packers, you can make an argument, have the deepest wide receiver core in the league. I mean, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs, all these guys are really, really good players, and they're making plays. I didn't even mention Christian Watson. He had a touchdown catch as well. I mean, they go super, super deep, and they each kind of have like a unique skill set. So I feel like the Packers just have an amazing kind of infrastructure around Jordan Love. I think the offensive line actually played pretty well as well against that stout Eagles defensive line. Somebody that I was surprised to see that got a decent role was Emmanuel Wilson. I didn't really know much about him heading into this game, but he was taking kind of a few touches away from Josh Jacobs. He was in for a decent amount of snaps. It kind of felt like every other drive or so, he was getting in for the early downs, and then Josh Jacobs would come in for like the third down passing situations. And I mean, he had a pretty nice couple of carries. I wonder if he's going to get a bigger role as the season progresses. But Matt LaFleur, we know his offense is always going to be super creative. He had a couple of really nice folds into the offense as well. I mean, I feel like there was a lot of guys kind of running open a lot of times just because of how good the scheme was. Obviously, the little end around reverse to Jaden Reed where he showed off his excellent speed to get in the end zone. I mean, the Packers just have a fantastic offense. Defensively, I do still have some questions. This was Jeff Hafley's first ever game calling plays in the NFL, but the Packers pass rush was not really getting home outside of Rashawn Gary, and I guess that is kind of understandable. The Eagles probably have a top 3 offensive line in the league, but they were struggling to get after Jalen Hurts a little bit, and then in the back end, they did have some coverage bust. Jair Alexander did not have a good game. A.J. Brown went over 100 yards, beat him for a very long, deep touchdown, which I do think kind of helped the momentum swing back in the favor of the Eagles. But I thought their second round pick, Javon Bullard, was in on a lot of tackles. He had 11 in the game, so he has a knack for the football. I think he's going to make some more plays as the season goes along. I think Quay Walker also had a couple of big stops against Saquon Barkley, but they're going to have to figure out the pass rush outside of Rashawn Gary and then probably try and figure out some things in the back end of their defense because the Eagles kind of just moved the ball up and down the field. It was not very hard for them, and they have a lot of new pieces as well. A new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. Jason Kelsey's not there on the offensive line. Saquon Barkley, new running back as well. And Jalen Hurts didn't even play well. He had those 2 interceptions, 1 in the red zone, 1 in really minus territory, and then he had those fumbles as well. I don't even feel like Jalen Hurts was playing well, and they were still able to move the ball up and down the field. So the Packers, defensively, that is still a really big question mark moving forward for this team. The Eagles went over 400 yards, had 25 first downs. I do think the turf as well. I mean, we got to talk about going to Brazil a little bit. I don't really know what the NFL was thinking with that. I don't love the thought process of just making a team waste a home game, going to an international game, and then like eight plus hours, I think was the flight time for both of these teams for just week number 1. And then the turf was not even good. Players were slipping all over the field. I think Saquon Barkley slipped multiple times, and even in the back end of the secondary, it was really hard for these guys to cover these receivers because they couldn't get any nice grip on the turf. So I think that was a big reason why we had so many big plays because of just the poor condition of the field. So the NFL for these international games really need to come up with a better plan because there's been multiple times now teams going to these, I guess, soccer stadiums. The turf or grass is not really up to standard for the NFL. So I think they need to kind of figure that out because we did see just a ton of slippage, and I definitely think that was a contributing factor why there were so many points scored in this game. So I don't want to sound the alarm completely on the Packers defense just because it was the first game of Hafley calling plays. It was the first game of this new scheme, and also just the condition of the turf. It's kind of harder to play, as a cornerback going up against a receiver, trying to mirror their routes and run with them down the field. It's definitely a big advantage for the offense. So that is something to pay attention to the next couple of weeks. If this Packers defense can find its footing and continue to improve, or if it's just going to be the type of Packers defense we've seen the past maybe 2 decades, just a pretty flawed unit that does hold the team back. I mean, I feel like Aaron Rodgers could have had a lot more success in the postseason if he did have some better defenses in his prime years. But obviously the biggest concern right now is the health of Jordan Love. I mean, we saw Malik Willis come in for the final 2 plays and he skipped the ball to Romeo Doubs, which was like a 5-yard out. And then on the Hail Mary, he got sacked. How do you get sacked on a Hail Mary? Literally the whole purpose of it is to make sure the ball gets up into the air to at least give your wide receiver a chance of catching it. And he couldn't even do that. So I do not think Malik Willis is the answer if Jordan Love does miss some time to be the backup. They're going to have to bring in maybe Ryan Tannehill, like I mentioned earlier. But since this game was played on Friday, the Packers do have a mini bye week before their game next week against the Indianapolis Colts. I don't want to speak too soon, but I feel like it would be kind of crazy to assume that Jordan Love would be playing in this game. But fingers crossed that we do get some good news because this sucks, especially so early in the NFL season. I mean, it really just rips the cord out of the hope for a team for the rest of the season. And you hate to see that just in week number 1. But let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts about Jordan Love and what do you think this means for the Packers moving forward. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Drop a like in the video if you did enjoy it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.